The work we are presenting, actually Scott and myself, we have had great privilege to serve as co-chairs of UNEG Task Force on Joint Evaluation. And that task force had two main strands. One was looking at UNDAF-related guidance and support, and then the other strand was on guidance related to joint evaluation. We'd also like to acknowledge the support we have received from the members of the task force. At one point, we have almost a dozen agencies represented. We had UNDP, UNFPA, ILO, UN Women, FAO, JEF, MDG Fund, all the major agencies were represented, and a number of colleagues are here who will, I would invite them to join us during discussion if there are questions, and also their own perspectives as well. UNDAF, when we hear about it, we talk about outcome. UNDAF does not talk about impact. It does not stop at output, so we felt that this slide might be a good place to start. How do we look at outcome level evaluations? Of course, results. And that's where we get stuck, because that's not what UNDAF evaluations are telling us. I won't go into detail in that, because there is a whole formal review of UNDAF evaluations led by JIU that will tell us authoritatively where UNDAF evaluations have been, where evaluations are going, and what more needs to be done. But from our counterparts in DOCO and others, we hear that we are not actually getting a good assessment of outcome level results through UNDAF evaluations. And guidance, obviously, would be a good way to go in terms of providing inputs. Unfortunately, for when it comes to UNDAF evaluation, we still have to ask why UNDAF evaluation, because not everybody seems to be convinced that UNDAF should be evaluated. In this room, I'm sure that's not the case, but outside, many country team members and others have not come to agreement that every single UNDAF should be evaluated, although the UNDAF programming guidelines starting 2010 made it mandatory that each and every UNDAF in its penultimate year must be evaluated. But there are many exceptions. Also, the recent QCPR 2012, which sets the broad policy stage for the UN system at the global level development work, also at the country level, calls for a great role for MND, also looking at RBM, and also explicit role for independent evaluation. I'm already running into time issue here. Now, because of that background, obviously UNEG had to come in and take a proactive and a lead role to develop systematic guidance. So we basically worked with our counterpart, in this case the DOCO in New York, which is the technical body that works with UN Development Group. And the idea was that to boost quality, credibility, and use of evaluation, we need to have more systematic evaluation guidance beyond what we had 3-4 years ago. And that's what this work has focused on. So we call it UNEG and DOCO initiative. Although we maintained our independence or our objectivities, the whole technical part of the work came from UNEG community. But we did collaborate with them in terms of ownership of the process, because there was no way that we could develop a guidance and launch it without the core counterpart in UNEG, in UNDAF, and that's DOCO. Through 3 years of work, we came up with 3 main products. One is FAQs. That was the starting point. That clarified a lot of issues and why this was important, what's with the scope, content, and so on, going all the way to implementation and use. We went beyond that, and we revised the existing terms of reference guidance, and this time we made it very much user-friendly, updated it based on UNEG norms and standards, also aligned with the evolving more recent UNDAF programming guidance, looking at outcomes and how do we go about looking at what difference UN's work at the country level has made, also looking at cross-cutting issues including integrating gender and human rights aspects in evaluation and so on. Beyond that, we focused explicitly on use of evaluation, dissemination issues, and one aspect of that obviously is management response. So there was a guidance developed on management response as well. Again, the gist here is that the guidance is quite broad. It is technical in nature, but it also builds in ownership as to how do you work with government in terms of bringing different stakeholders together. The TOR itself provides a template, and most countries can simply follow the template unless they want to bring in specific context that relate to their programs, because this is more or less geared towards the guidance for UNDAF programming itself. And normally there seems to be consistency across countries. We also talked about the process as to how does one go about conceiving, planning, implementing, and using evaluation in a country context, working with national partners. So again, the process there is very well articulated. Again, further detail in terms of preparation, the planning phase, the implementation phase, use, all of those are very well articulated. The governance structure, again, I won't have time to go into detail. This is all very much available in DOCO and also UNEG website. Management response, again, what is the rationale for management response? This is also part of now the guidance of UNDAF programming, that not only the UNDAF evaluation is mandatory, but management response is also mandatory, and there is a template as to how to go about doing management response. So that's also part of the guidance. During the dissemination, last year we did quite a bit of dissemination through webinar, and of course this is in several websites now, and DOCO has been taking it to regional meetings and so on. And during the dissemination, we emphasized a lot on use and knowledge management of UNDAF evaluations, all the way go from not only stopping at good quality products that are credible, but also going into how do we take that product into systematic learning, and also generating knowledge, and also achieving real impact in terms of revised, improved program design, and better results for for people in general, environment, all this stuff that comes as part of the UNDAF scope. Now we will move to the challenges and issues, but I'll just conclude by saying that the lesson here in terms of developing guidance is working very closely with the counterparts, and also working it in a progressive manner, progressive cumulative manner, because oftentimes, we can have a tendency to rush into guidance, but that won't make much sense. We took really 2 whole years to come up with those 3 products. So in terms of guidance, there's a lot of ownership, there's a lot of credibility to guidance as well. DOCO and others take pride in this guidance that they work with UNEG. They have kept our, call it independence, our objectivity, and our technical expertise, and they take boast in that as well, that they didn't influence the process, and this is very much evaluation community that this work. But in terms of ownership and understanding of how it relates to the context, I think they have very openly accepted this, and that to me is one of the best learnings. Where we have failed is we have no idea. To be honest, in UNEG as a whole, I have been involved in 6 years now, we don't know how we take guidance work to real change, how we ensure that guidance are used and real changes occur through, maybe that needs to be, I wouldn't call it evaluation, needs to be reviewed. Maybe UNEG should stop really issuing too many guidances and reflect back and say, how are we using this guidance, not only internally, but externally as well. Scott will finish the presentation.
Okay, thanks very much, Krishna. I think the UNDAF Joint Evaluation Task Force has done some really good work over the last few years in trying to develop this UNDAF evaluation agenda, and I think some of these tools we do see that they are being used in the field quite a bit, so we are confident that these are useful resources that are being put out. At the same time, it is very much a time of change at UNEG. We are trying to think about how we can have a more strategic approach to UNDAF evaluations. The task force, I think we've kind of reached the limits at this point of what we can produce in terms of traditional guidance and how to do things, and Krishna and I are going to be talking a little bit later about joint evaluations as well. But we were reflecting on what would be the next steps, what are the challenges that we have to address, and how could UNEG respond to these challenges over the course of the next strategic framework. So we're very much looking, for your ideas and your input, and I think we've got a great audience here that can really help us constructively think about some of these issues. In terms of issues identified by the working group, Clearly, the evaluation aspect of the UNDAF programming cycle is by far the weakest link in terms of, how do we do it, how do we develop capacities to move forward in that area, what is it all about. So it's very much a weak link, and we do need to find ways that we can fill the gap better, and UNEG support that. One of the main issues that we really do face in moving forward is the lack of funding currently for UNDAF evaluations. Limited capacity at the country level, because these are UN country team-led evaluations, limited capacity at the country level to undertake these evaluations. And I think we've also identified a certain level of lack of interest, a sense that how can these evaluations actually be useful on top of the country program evaluations that we're already doing. I think it's also a useful occasion now for us to look at the regional role and what is going on at the regional level. A number of agencies, for example, do have systems of regional level M&E advisors, senior managers, UNEDAP. There are a lot of actors at the regional level, and I think there's an opportunity now for us to begin to reflect on, okay, what should be the role of these regional actors, and what role can they take, along with UNEG, in strengthening the UNDAF evaluation system. Another very big constraint that we really do have to put on the table is the lack of involvement of DOCO. DOCO really does not have any operational evaluation capacity at a central level to actually support evaluations in the countries that are required to do the UNDAF evaluations. So I think that lack of capacity there is something that we struggle with, certainly on the UNEG side in New York. So that is certainly part of the landscape that we need to take into account as we move ahead. Another issue we've identified are the system of midterm reviews. I think there's a sense that these are, in the absence of a strong UNDAF evaluation systems, these midterm reviews are being seen as a substitute for evaluation. And I think there's problems, obviously, with that. There's a trap in that. And this is something that we need to differentiate a bit more. What is a midterm review process versus what is an independent evaluation of UNDAF, and what are the different types of outputs and expectations of each process. So those were some of the key challenges and issues that we identified moving forward. If we could just move on specifically to collaboration with DOCO, there's obviously a number of upcoming opportunities where UNEG could get more involved in this process, but we need to do this in a strategic way. One of the activities we've identified are the webinars. These have been successfully carried out in the past by members of the different evaluation offices, centralized evaluation offices. I think there's an interest to update some of those webinars and to make those available as soon as possible. So that is one area that we're thinking that we might be able to collaborate. I'm running out of time. There's also the UNDAF program guidance revision that is upcoming. There's going to be a section on M&E as part of those programming guidance. I think that's something where UNEG and the membership can look and can help out. There's also talk about, do UNDAF evaluations really need to be as heavy, and are there possibilities for having a so-called light touch UNDAF evaluation, a rapid type evaluation? This is something we need to explore a little bit more. How heavy do they need to be? Because when there's limited capacity at the country level to implement, do we need rather to be thinking of lighter, easier approaches? So very much would welcome your views and feedback on that. We do have plans for a quality assurance system to perhaps as a pilot measure to assist 3 UN country teams with conducting a good, robust UNDAF evaluation. We've struggled a bit with this over the last year. 2 of the countries were in the end decided that they didn't really need the assistance, or they wouldn't be doing an UNDAF, or the time wasn't right. And then we had one country, I believe it was El Salvador, Krishna, that was interested in working with us. But again, we were trying to define a little bit better what we in UNEG could do to support them in that process that wasn't actually funding the evaluations, but would be strategic inputs. We were considering possibilities around having a database for consulting selection, a pre-identified pool. We could perhaps review terms of reference to make sure that they were correctly focused, they were strategically focused. And we were also thinking we could support in terms of knowledge management initiatives, trying to be a bit more proactive in capturing some of the lessons of conducting UNDAF evaluations in the countries, in the regions, and disseminating that through the networks. And I think there's a very important opportunity here with all the experience in the room to actually begin that process even here. So just putting out a few questions for discussion. One of the things we are concerned about is, whereas the QCPR does very much call for need for better UNDAF evaluations, there doesn't seem to be really any effective demand to have good quality UNDAF evaluations. The system seems to be getting by without them. I'm not trying to suggest that that's a good thing or a desirable thing, but we could really address this question of effective demand, and is it really there? Again, there's always a question of, who should be accountable for UNDAF evaluations? Where ultimately does accountability lie? And then finally, the specific roles that UNEG should be pursuing beyond the guidance, because as I think there's a sense that we've reached the limitations of where we can take the guidance from now, and we really do need to envisage new roles. Some of those areas that we're going to be talking about at the AAGM talk about a new advocacy role for UNEG in this area, the possibility of lighter approaches to UNDAF evaluations. Under Strategic Objective 3, which I'll be coordinating and leading up, I think there are some opportunities to include that in the work plan and to really think about, going beyond just guidance. We've mentioned webinars, preparing lists of evaluations, getting all the UNDAF evaluations all under one roof located, and also maybe the UNDAF guidance revision, and are getting more involved in that, to making sure that it's strategically presented and reflects current capacities. Okay, I think that's about it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.